Welcome back, Trinidad and Tobago. Joining us on set now, David Simmons and Gaynelle Abraham Brathwaite. And we're talking about the International Day of Forests and a number of initiatives that the EMA is heading to climate change, reforestation, and understanding what's taking place in the environment. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Hema.
Now, first of all, let's start with the International Day of Forests. What exactly is it?
Well, it's globally they're celebrating the International Day of Forest, and they're just trying to bring some focus on what's been done to protect our forests around the world. And in Trinidad, we do have lots of forests. I mean, we seem to be more aware of it from a wildlife standpoint because a lot of our wildlife, which is a very an activity that a lot of people engage in here in Trinidad, that we pay attention to the forest from that perspective. But the forest does lots of different things, including the fact that, well, in the context of climate change, it is considered one of those areas where you could store some of that carbon that is generated from greenhouse gases. So it's quite relevant for us to take cognizance of the fact that internationally it's been celebrated, and we should at least understand a bit of how the forest is important to Trinidad and Tobago.
Now, you look at the National Reforestation, Carbon Sequestration, Wildlife and Livelihood projects. National Reforestation, how far off have we to achieving your goal? What is the goal of this project?
Well, let me first state that the name of the project is the National Restoration, Carbon Sequestration, Wildlife and Livelihoods Project. And as the name entails, there are several components to this project. The restoration part is focused on the reforestation, specifically, more or less, of the River swamp. And my project is actively engaged in trying to restore forests as well as maybe plant trees where initially there were no trees or forests. So that would be afforestation. And this is because quite some time ago, rice farmers had, illegal rice farmers were inside of the river swamp, and as a result of that, a lot of the land was degraded. So now, through this project, we have objectives, of which one is to plant approximately 500 hectares of forest in the river swamp. In doing that, we expect that we would add some value in terms of carbon sequestration, and as well invite or encourage more wildlife back into the swamp.
Now, in terms of carbon footprint and climate change, we've been hearing about that since Al Gore has been championing this cause,
Yes.
this Simmons. But in terms of taking it seriously and understanding the impacts of climate change on our local ecosystem, what are some of the impacts that we can see and we're feeling now?
Well, I think the first thing that you could probably identify as a manifestation of climate change is the flooding that is taking place quite regularly. Now, I mean, we've had flooding for a long time, but the nature of the flooding that's taking place, for instance, what we're seeing is that we probably have very short bursts of showers, but those showers are a lot heavier. So, for instance, in 2012, in the Diego Martin area, when you had probably the rain for just a little over an hour, you had massive flooding in the whole area. And the following year, the same thing happened. So that's one manifestation. If we just think back, just late last year, Manzanilla, a lot of that flooding that, which occurred down there and the washing away of the roads, again, short showers, heavy showers. So we've seen changes in the whole pattern of our rainfall. For instance, we're right in the dry season right now, but yesterday we had lots of rain. So again, from a flooding standpoint, we'll see that, but also in the case of agriculture, we'll see where the extreme heat or rising temperatures are going to affect our agricultural outputs. So it's in a lot of areas you see it being manifested. I think the public may not be totally aware, and I think that is where we need to ensure that the public are much more aware of what are some of the manifestations so they could identify clearly with it.
Now, looking at the manifestations and seeing the impacts, we talk about the fact that we're seeing different varying weather patterns. In terms of the ecosystem and species being endangered, I know that that is something that is gaining international traction. How have we been seeing that play out in our local scene?
Well, we could see, I don't think we've done the kinds of vulnerability assessments to determine the full extent of the impact of climate change on the various sectors. So this is something which has to be done. But what you've seen and what you're hearing that's taking place globally, for instance, in the marine sector, because of warming ocean surfaces, you will see a migration of the fish to more colder regions. So our fish fishermen will find that they're getting, less fish from that standpoint. Our coral reefs, they're endangered because of the fact that you have acid rain that is, affecting our waters and also affecting our coral reefs. And given the fact that we depend so heavily on our coral reefs around the region, we'll see that it's been affected, quite severely from that standpoint.
Now, in looking at the project that you've been doing for restoration, carbon sequestration, and livelihood projects, let's talk a little bit about some of the projects that you've been working on.
Okay, let me say first that the EMA is the coordinating body of this project, and so we have partners in terms of the implementation and the rollout of the project. A key partner on this project is the Forestry Division, and the Forestry Division actually provides the technical assistance and hands-on assistance in terms of evaluation of the soil, evaluation of the plants, assisting us in going into the communities and training the CBOs in the area, and I mean community-based organizations. The EMA cannot do this by themselves, and so in the attempt to reforest 500 hectares of the river swamp, we engage CBOs in the surrounding communities. We train them in nurseries and how to care for plants and to raise plants. When those plants are ready, we also engage them in going into the area, into the swamp, and planting using the naturally grown plants for that area. So they go in and we assign them their plots and they plant. We also, at this point in time, we are very much involved in fire suppression because forest fires are very much a peril to the project and a peril to our environment. I remember years back, you could look on the mountains and just see, for example, in Diego Martin, what was green is just now all gone, brown. And so fire suppression is key also to preserving that environment. So those would be some of the initiatives that we get involved in.
Looking at the initiatives, and I know we have a couple of minutes again to wrap this interview. We also have a video to share with our viewers. The water pollution rules. Recently we had a situation in Wausau which affected the national community. How cognizant are members of the public about what the water pollution rules are and the implications of not properly monitoring our watercourses? Well,
the EMA is very much active in going into communities, educating from school-age children to community-based organizations on water pollution, on fire suppression, and on all of the environmental issues that affect us. I mean, it's a work in progress, but it's something that we're very actively involved in.
Looking at that, your closing comments, Ms. Simmons?
Well, I think in Trinidad, we recognize that, and in fact is said quite often, that Trinidad is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas in the region. And from that standpoint, I think there's a responsibility on the part of Trinidad and Tobago to ensure that they pay attention to the amount of greenhouse gases that are being emitted and introduce mitigation measures to try and address those sorts of things. So I think we're getting there. A lot has been done over the past few years, and through some of the projects that we just mentioned there, you'll see over the years, the next coming years, a couple of programs being rolled out to address those problems.
Looking at addressing the problems of not only climate change, but understanding the protection of the ecosystem, the impact on all of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, we're going to share with you a video on climate change just to bring our discussion into context as we close this interview. I'm Hamer Ramkey, this is The Morning Brew.
So the climate is changing faster than our efforts to address it.
The time to answer humankind's greatest challenge is now.
We have abundant evidence that we're changing our climate. Climate change is one of the defining threats of our times.
Climate change is a defining issue of our age.